behalf of HSBC, a very warm welcome to the second event in our Think Bigger Innovation Series. My name's Rachel Rankin and I'm the Head of Marketing at HSBC Australia. Thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and waters from which we are all dialing in today. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present. I also acknowledge our attendees who identify as being Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander and recognise the diversity of First Nations peoples, countries and cultures in Australia. Today's session will feature some opening remarks from John Scott, our Head of Global Liquidity and Cash Management at HSBC Australia, before we turn to our expert speakers for a lively panel that I've got the distinct pleasure of leading. I'd like to remind you that if you have any questions during the webinar, you can submit these through the Q&A functionality. We'll try to answer these at the end of the panel discussion, but if a fuller answer is required or if we run out of time, we will be following up with you directly for feedback. Please know we do capture all the questions, and if you experience any issues, there's a Contact Us tab on the event platform. And a friendly reminder, the session is being recorded. It's now my pleasure to hand over to John Scott to deliver some opening remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of HSBC, I would like to welcome you and thank you all for joining us today. This virtual event is the second in a series of innovation webinars, which bring to life the stories of our corporate customers and share how they have adapted, transformed, and innovated during a time of considerable change. To discuss the theme of Bigger Future, today I am pleased to say we are joined by Chris Hurst, Chief Executive Officer of Palladium, and Rod Henderson, CEO of Ampco Control, both as senior representatives from the manufacturing and management consultancy industries who are going to share how they're factoring innovation into their medium to long-term business plans. So, 2021 has begun. And though we've all breathed a collective sigh of relief that 2020 is behind us, the world is still managing the consequences of the COVID-19 virus. Australia is one of the lucky few countries experiencing relatively low levels of community transmission and showing positive signs of economic recovery. But with many of our key trading partners from the US, UK, and parts of Asia still being affected by border closures and local regulations, we're often not able to do business the way that we used to. As the leading banking partner for international businesses operating in Australia, at HSBC we have witnessed the innovative ways our corporate clients have responded to new industry and social restrictions. My team and I have been inspired by your stories of resilience, adaptability and survival. And in the last session of the series, we heard from the leaders of King Living, Education Centre of Australia and the Pact Group about how they had adopted new technologies to meet their customers' needs and enable success last year. As the way we live and work seems to have changed for the long term, business leaders are factoring reactive enhancements into their business as usual. And I'm excited to hear how the two leaders joining us today have adapted their longer-term plans to meet the changed environment that we all now face. For organisations like HSBC, one example of how we evolved is in how we run our events and share insights. The virtual format of today's event was one that we could not have imagined being the norm only a year ago. The move toward virtual events can even be seen at the largest conferences and traditionally those with the highest attendee interaction. An example of this is the Consumer Electronics Show, CES, the most influential tech event in the world that usually takes place in Las Vegas each year. In 2020, the conference attracted 170,000 attendees and over 4,000 companies who showcased their latest tech. Now, I, like many in the world who are interested in the latest technology, always take a particular interest in the products showcased at CES. CES 2021 took place last month and was 100% virtual. There were 1,000 virtual exhibits and still the most amazing innovations in consumer technology that were on show. It's no surprise then that the pandemic tech was a big theme this year, with self-cleaning desktop monitors, portable air purifiers, and even a cleaning robot concept that was presented in the virtual showroom. We also saw the electronics company, LG, showcase a transparent OLED display, which shows the variety of ways we'll see digital displays used in the future. Another device we all know is evolving with the introduction of a rollable phone that allows you to increase the size of your smartphone screen just at the touch of a button. Now, I'm not sure whether a smart mask from the company Razer will suit me, but it's interesting to see how the mask includes speaker pods to make sure your voice isn't muffled when wearing it. So while the Innovation Series isn't designed for companies to launch their latest tech designs, we've made sure that our virtual event format provides you with an interactive and informative experience. As many of you would know, HSBC is on an innovation journey of its own. And as the head of the global liquidity and cash management business, I'm proud of the digital banking solutions we've launched in the last 12 months to help our clients manage their finances digitally and build smarter businesses. But like on any journey, there are bumps in the road and twists and turns that we face. We aren't perfect, but we aren't finished. This is a journey that we share with you, our clients. By listening to you and understanding how we can support your business, we ourselves can develop, experiment, test and implement solutions to serve your needs. It is an ongoing journey, and we need to continue to evolve and invest in the best solutions to support your business outcomes. Our innovative tools are available on our banking platform, HSBC Net, to help you transact across borders, connect your supply chains, and consolidate your retail and e-commerce payments and receivables and manage foreign exchange. An example of bringing value to our clients is our liquidity management dashboard, which provides an aggregated view of your available cash globally in the currency of your choice. This solution, accessed via HSBC Net, is further enhanced by our latest addition with a cash flow forecasting tool, where our corporate clients are provided with a forward-looking view of their cash flows based on a combination of historical trends and expected payment flows. Initial reaction from treasurers is extremely positive and allows for a reliable forecast in order to make better informed investment decisions. We also entered the e-commerce space in 2020, and our Omni Collect solution is designed to meet your payment collection needs, regardless whether you sell online or via physical retail stores. We also provide digital corporate cards, known as virtual cards, to our customers to help them take advantage of the corporate card repayment period, as well as to optimize working capital. Something in the current environment which is critical to any business. Finally, we're putting the power of your payments data into your hands through data aggregation and spend analytics technology. Both MasterCard Business Analytics and RoboBuy are banking tech partners of HSBC that allows us to provide you with the data insights to derive business outcomes through actionable intelligence. Whatever 2021 brings us, it's important that we take it on with a sense of optimism. The IMF is expecting that through the distribution of vaccines and continued policy support from governments, the global economy will grow. And as organizations and as people, innovation and transformation will only help us to drive this along. At HSBC, we want to be on this journey with you, and so I do hope we can connect with you and discuss how we might be able to help your business achieve its ambitions here in Australia, in Asia or globally. Please enjoy the session today.
Thank you, John, and what fascinating insights, and sets the tone really well for the discussion today, although personally I'm not sure about that mask. But it's now my pleasure to kick off our panel discussion, which will focus on how organisations are positioning themselves for the future and factoring innovation into their business plans. Rather than me introducing our speakers today, I thought I'd hand over to each of them to introduce themselves, their company, and explore what innovation means to them before we start the formal discussion. Rod, it'd be great if you could kick us off, please. Could you tell us a little about Ampco Control and some of the innovative projects you've been most proud of delivering over the last 12 months?
Of course, thanks very much, Rachel. Ampco Control is a Newcastle-based company. We've been in business around about 53 years and we employ about 1,000 people across our operations, which are spread right across Australia and also up into Asia and Europe. Manufacturers of electrical equipment for the resources, the infrastructure and the energy sectors. We carry our own design engineers and we also have the capability to manufacture everything from raw materials right through to finished product and then service everything as well. So we've prepared a little video for you to show you some of the innovative products that we've developed this year.
Thanks, Rod. Amazing to see those innovative products in the video. Chris, could I possibly hand over to you to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure, thanks. Look, Palladium is a professional services firm that strives to help companies and governments drive social progress, but whilst also realising commercial and economic growth. And we do this through a combination of 4 primary interconnected service lines around helping organisations design and develop their strategies, helping deliver large-scale projects in complex environments, and procurement and logistics with a key focus there on accessing the last mile, the difficult locations, and then finally impact investment, the facilitation of capital flows to organisations and other opportunities that can provide both a social impact and a financial return. And when Palladium's not a very well-known brand in the Australian market, but we are an Australian firm, but operating in around 90 countries around the world with upwards of 3,000, 3,500 staff at any one time.
Amazing, 90 countries, that's some global footprint. Rod, I'd really like to explore a little bit further one of those products that we saw in the video, the Ventis ventilator project, which was a rapid response to creating emergency ventilators to assist COVID-19 patients. How did you achieve this in such a short period of time, and what do you think was key to making this collaboration a success?
Yeah, we were asked by New South Wales Health back in March of last year, could we manufacture a number of ventilators in the hundreds, and could we manufacture them in a very short period of time? Was their response to what was looking like a major pandemic was on our hands at that point in time, and could we assist in that process? So we rallied very quickly and we pulled together the University of Newcastle, the John Hunter Hospital, Health Infrastructure, New South Wales, as well as 2 private engineering firms up in Newcastle. And in the first 11 days, we put together a prototype ventilator based on what we knew from our traditional markets. The spec was that we couldn't use any medical devices because there was going to be a fear of shortage of medical devices around the world. So in 11 days, we had a prototype up and running, and 7 days later, we had that prototype working on the crash test dummy up at the John Hunter Hospital. And we achieved that through lots of collaboration with those parties that I mentioned earlier. The real key to that was the way that the parties worked together, and we actually ran about 4 parallel paths at once to make sure that we were going to hit the money on what we needed to get to. So after that, the government gave us a contract to manufacture 10 ventilators with the goal to getting them approved by the TGA for emergency use under the COVID pandemic, which we achieved as well. And by November of last year, we had actually had those units sitting there ready to go. Now, thankfully, we'll never need to use them because New South Wales has done very well during the pandemic. But what it proved was we could pivot and we could, with collaboration partners, get there very quickly.
It's amazing how quickly you managed that project. Chris, I'm sure you've got examples of how you've supported an organisation with crisis response in a rapid and agile way. What lessons can our audience learn when tackling innovation in this way?
Yeah, so I mean, we saw a huge number of organisations who very rapidly became very concerned of the risk that COVID would put to their business, and so they came to us, and we developed some modelling tools which quickly enabled them to run scenarios and understand what those impacts might be, and then more importantly develop policies and strategies to mitigate what may or may not come about. But we also internally used our procurement and logistics capability to develop an ability to provide PPE equipment at scale to help governments throughout the Pacific, domestically in Australia, access PPE that was obviously in great demand globally and with very significant broken supply chains across the globe.
I think we're all starting to accept and get used to how things work in the new economy. Rod, I'd love to understand how you're preparing Ampco Control for the future. What does your 2021 business strategy include, and how are you addressing some of the key issues like safety and sustainability?
So we've just started our 2022 planning process, which will take us through now for the next 3 years. So the very key things that we did initially were we got 4 external speakers to come in and join us. So we had someone from the health industry, we had someone who understood supply chain risk and management of that. We had another expert from the energy sector, and then we had HSBC's Paul Bloxham come and talk to us about the economy and the commodities cycle as well. So out of that, we locked ourselves away for 2 days, and we started to really put down on paper what mattered most importantly to the business going forward. And those 2 key things for us were strategically, how do we grow our customer base from our traditional markets, hence the 4 speakers that came in to give us some advice. That was based on what the federal government had put out late last year around sovereign manufacturing across Australia. So we put a big focus on that, and we've identified a number of key areas that we can do in that particular space. But we also are going to concentrate very much on our existing customer base to make sure we service that customer base very, very well. So they're the 2 key external strategies. And the key internal strategy for us, or the key internal goal for us out of that, is to make sure that we've got the capability and culture wrapped around that to be able to support that growth phase that we're anticipating going through. So 3 main areas that we put a lot of focus on in our strategy planning for this year.
Fantastic. And Chris, Palladium's got a key strength in transformational business strategy. Does Rod's example align with how other industries and governments are approaching their business plans this year?
Yeah, I think there's elements that definitely do. I mean, Palladium's view around transformational business strategy is very much around looking at sustainable business strategies that can impact the broader system that they're operating in. So if you think about, you know, a lot of organisations over the last decades have talked a lot about CSR, and some have moved more progressively into philanthropic or capital. We're not talking about that type of scenario. What we're talking about is helping organisations look at the footprint they leave in the communities where they operate, and figure out business strategies which not only improves their bottom line, but also improves the livelihoods of communities and the businesses that are up and down their value chain. And so, you know, if you start talking about it, some more practical things of what that means, it's helping organisations move forward from a compliance mentality around meeting obligations, whether it's a workplace health and safety, or looking at slavery in a supply chain is obviously a very important topic in Australia at the moment with the introduction of new legislation. But also then looking, you know, the next stage a lot of organisations look at is, okay, well, we need to integrate that into what we do. So looking at their procurement strategies, how better do we actually procure the resources we need to deliver? But our intent is to take them to the next level, and can they become the first mover around a new business model, which is going to not only accelerate their growth, but the growth of those around. You know, there's some really good examples of that we're seeing. You know, most excitingly at the moment are a couple around climate change, and large organisations who are working with us to identify business propositions, particularly in forestry and other natural resource settings, that can help them realise their commitments to net zero targets in 2050.
Sustainability seems to be a theme that continues to come up, and I know it's a very important one. One of the other key ones that I think came out of changes that we saw last year was how much we value our people. Now, Rod, in the research that we did on Ampco Control, you speak quite often about how much you value your people. What does the future look like for the employees of Ampco Control in terms of the ways they work and ensuring that they've got the skills that sets them for success in the future?
Across our values, we have 5 key values across Ampco Control, and the first two are safety and people, and then innovation, customer and performance. So our view is always that if we could get the safety and people side of things right, the balance of things generally take care of themselves. So they'll be innovative, they'll look after our customers, and they'll strive to give the key performance that Ampco Control needs to run as a company. So we put a lot of programs in place. We're running out a Live Work Better program at the moment, which is all around safety leadership and culture, that side of things. So we're engaging some third parties to give us a hand, and we're running out and training all 950 people across Australia that we're doing there, and also our global workforce as well, eventually across there. So that's the first thing we're doing. During the pandemic, we made sure that first and foremost we had people in a safe environment. Those that could work from home, we put at home. Those that were based in workshops, we split shifts away so that we could have fewer people in workshops at any point in time. We also came up with a safety app that we got people to fill out before they started work each day, just to give us any signals if there was any symptoms or they'd been to a hotspot area, those type of things. So we get that welfare thing out of the way, and then we looked at programs around leadership programs and those that wanted to aspire to be into leader areas. So we have a leader development learning network, we call it, where each month we run a different topic for our leaders. We have systems in place where we allow our employees to do external training, and we can assist them if they need to be. But we also have a lot of internal programs that we do in training, and then we also wrap a good REM strategy around that and a reward strategy around that as well. We realised, I guess, about 3 years ago around mental health, how much of that a concern that is in society today. So we work very closely with a Canberra-based business to give us some training in that area. We have a support peer network in place around that as well. So we have about 75 peer supporters across the group that does that. So our people are very important to us. and it's important enough that we have a flexibility in place that allows them to do their job, but also feel safe in the environment that they're in.
Chris, the pandemic's seen a real shift to remote working in Australia. And Rod's just mentioned that his company as one have done this. But how do you see this impacting the way organisations are balancing the need for their people to be working on site or in the office against a virtual model?
Yeah, I think we're still really in the early stages of understanding how this is going to play out. I mean, a lot of organisations, ourselves included, I mean, a lot of the places we work, people are still exclusively working from remote sites. You know, what a lot of people have been focusing on is that immediate reaction. How do we physically continue productivity? How do we support our people? And what I don't think we're really coming to grips with yet universally is what are the longer term? So what are the impacts in 2 or 3 years' time when we actually start seeing that, you know, are we able to create the same level of stickiness in relationships with people who we only know virtually versus people who we might have, you know, on day one of their start in the office had a cup of coffee with or whatever. And so, you know, the three kind of things that have been really important for us is, you know, we have a very strong culture that we've developed over the last 5 to 10 years, which is based on a number of guiding principles, and that's really held a lot of our people together and helped people get inducted into the organisation throughout the last 12 months. You know, with our geographic footprint, we always had tools which enabled kind of good communication and information flows globally. They really came to the fore. We had a huge head start in that regard. And, you know, it actually really highlighted the quality of some of the knowledge tools we had. But the other thing which people are really starting to work through now, and it's probably less important in Australia, but definitely more in other parts of the world, is that employee assistance support. How do you continue to provide adequacy of that over the long term? Because some of the impacts of this on individuals and their families, etc., is really elongated and far more than what those EAP programs have historically been used for. So I guess the key answer to me is it's a little bit of a wait and see, and I think the really forward-looking organisations are the ones who are actually trying to drill down to what this means externally rather than so much internally and in terms of how they drive their business further.
Just a reminder to everyone on the webinar, please do submit your questions through the Q&A functionality. I'd love to start calling on some questions from the audience. I actually have 1 or 2 here already. So Chris, one for you. What are the ways Palladium's exploring the opportunities that exist around sustainability?
Oh, look, I mean, everything we do is around sustainability, so it's a perpetual exploration. I think the key for us is structuring our business so that there's innovation going on across the board and that there's agility so that when we see opportunities, we're empowering people to go after them and giving them the tools and support they need to convert that into business for us and kind of positive impact is the term we use for society.
And one here for you as well, Rod. How does your organisation support rural Australian communities? We saw on your video some of those innovative ideas that you have that do support rural communities. Love you to delve into that a bit more.
Yeah, we've got 2 very key products that support rural and remote communities across the country. The first one, we developed a solar-powered or a hybrid solution around water purification. So we identified a need of about 2 years back of where we were working in the water sector that quite often the plants are built around the available power, not the available capacity of what's there. So we actually went about designing a portable one that would operate off solar with batteries back up and a small diesel generator. So we successfully deployed one of these at a little remote community called Gilgo out in about 70 kilometres outside of Alice Springs. It's the first time that particular community has access to potable water on a daily basis. Prior to that, they were bringing water in via truck or they were bringing in water in via bottles. So they had a bore, but the bore was not capable of being used for drinking water. So we put our system out there. We deployed it in 2 days and got it up and running. And that community now has up to 28,000 litres of fresh water a day feeding into their tanks. And in fact, the same, there's a cluster of small communities around that area, and we're even seeing now local members of that community pushing their wheelbarrows across and filling up portable tanks and the like, and running hoses across to their other properties. So that's the first way. We believe that's a revolutionary product in that particular space, in that there is over 300 communities in the Northern Territory alone that don't have access to daily drinking water, a basic human need that is inaccessible to some of our Indigenous communities out in the Northern Territory. So the second product we developed in conjunction with Horizon Power, which is a power utility in Western Australia. Ampco Control has formed an incorporated joint venture with the government trading entity that is known as Horizon Power. And Horizon have a very, very large network, as you can imagine, across southwest and northwest Western Australia. They have power lines that they run out to these smaller communities, and they have to be able to service these communities and keep power on to. So with the reliability of these systems, plus storms and bushfires and the like, they couldn't guarantee a certain percentage of power to stay on. So we developed with Horizon Power what we call a solar cube. Again, it was in the video there. It was the small 3 metre by 3 metre box that contains solar cells and batteries, and again, a small backup generator that now goes on to individual houses in rural situations, and they're taking those customers off power lines. So they are truly remote power supply people, and so far they've removed about 65 kilometres of power lines in Western Australia they no longer have to maintain, and they can give the consumers a much better uptime. So we've got a range of products in that particular area that we're really targeting in at remote communities. And what it's giving people the opportunity to do is to live where they choose to live, without the need to say, well, I have to live there because there's an electricity supply or there's a water supply, whatever the case may be. We can allow them to make that to happen.
It's amazing. And one of the things that you spoke there about is another collaboration point. And how important do you think, and it's possibly a question I'll throw to Chris again as well, but how important do you think it is in collaborating with others on some of these innovative ideas?
Oh, absolutely essential from our perspective. Not only with partners like Horizon Power, but also with education systems. We're a big partner, and we jointly own a company with the University of Newcastle that does high-end research. We bring in PhD students, we bring in undergraduates, we bring in postgraduates. At any point in time, we might have 10 to 15 students operating in our business who are the engineers and the researchers of the future. So we're giving them the industry experience, and they're giving us the experience of the wonderful education they've picked up out of the University of Newcastle. So, but the ventilator project was a partnership, the hybrid boat is a partnership. A lot of the products that we do rely on partnerships, and we do what we're good at, and we bring in partners who can add value to what we're doing, and we both win out of it.
Chris, do you think it's a trend that we're seeing in other industries? Have you seen similar collaborations?
Oh, I think so. I think the forward-leaning companies are all doing it based on collaboration, and it's a collaboration. The challenge becomes around collaboration or in a competitive environment, and again, where we're seeing some really significant gains is where competitors are actually choosing to collaborate to actually drive their own businesses, but the industry more broadly. And I mean, that's a really key part, is if we're looking at sustainable business plans, is, that final stage is really the industry driving and partnering with government to create the momentum, remove blockages that exist as society changes to enable capability to happen. I mean, the solar cube example is a really good example of that. In certain jurisdictions where we've worked, you must use the power grid, and if you don't use the power grid, you're not allowed to introduce technology. We've got to get away from some of those traditional blockages to industrial movement forward.
Yeah. And furthering that, are there organisations that Palladium itself is working and collaborating with?
I would say there's probably not many activities we're doing that we're not collaborating with. So it's kind of the opposite. It's almost impossible for me to pull an example of something where we aren't collaborating. So we have, collaborations from a technological perspective, from an education perspective, different segmentations around industry and very much around the value chains of our clients and ourselves that we're operating in. So we, as I mentioned earlier, we created a PPE business at scale. So, in that context, we're collaborating with factories, we're collaborating with testing organisations, and pulling together the expertise needed to create results.
There's a question here, and it was one that I was going to pick up on. You mentioned in one of your earlier answers, Chris, around supply chain disruption. So how are you seeing the impacts of supply chain disruption among your clients? And what strategies do you think organisations are using to mitigate some of these disruptions?
Yeah, so I think, the level of disruption seems to have calmed down in a lot of cases. In that kind of May to August period of time, we saw enormous amounts of both actual disruption, but also concern about what impending disruption. And so there has been some really key, changes to how that supply chain has worked to come across, to get over the barriers. But it's kind of almost, I wouldn't say it's back to a normality, but it's calmed down to the point where most of our customers have seen that, there's more ability to understand how to get what they need or how to send things where they need it to go. Watching, some of the air freight movements and how the different airlines pivoted, from the cargo capability throughout 2020 was fascinating. A lot of people learnt a lot through collaborating and understanding each other's business models, which ultimately just helps their business go forward.
And Rod, you were speaking about bringing in experts, and a lovely plug for HSBC's Paul Bloxham, which we appreciate, but about bringing in experts in the business planning process. How do you think you can better utilise some of the resources that are available, and who do you call on to do that?
Yeah, one of the very interesting speakers that we had last week was a lady who was the ex-director of preparedness for the Department of Defence. And her last assignment with Department of Defence before she moved into the consulting world was, what are the likely key events that could hit Australia and disrupt our supply chain? And she gave some wonderful examples of right down to how she gets milk delivered from the dairy up the road to her house and what could disrupt that. And it's amazing when you go down into several layers of the supply chain of how much dependency there is on overseas manufacturing in the whole of Australia's supply chain. So what we drew out of that, we tried to say, okay, some of the ideas that Cheryl Durant gave to us, where can we hone in as a company and take advantage as Australian manufacturers to get more into that supply chain? So out of that, we've identified probably 4 or 5 key areas in conjunction with what Cheryl gave us, with what Paul gave us, and the other 2 speakers that we'll hone in on now to try to shore up that Australian supply chain a little bit. That if we ever go into one of these things again, which unfortunately it's probably likely that we will in some time in the future, how can we be more as Australian-based companies be prepared to not only protect our supply chain but protect the country's supply chain, or be a point in protecting that supply chain?
Very parochial question here for you, Chris. So we've got people joining us from all over the country today, and I know that you've joined us from Brisbane, which we're really appreciative of. How do you see some of the differences in the business environment between some of the cities as you've travelled around? Does things feel different in Sydney now to what they have in Brisbane? Are you seeing changes?
Yeah, I was reflecting this morning. It's the first time I've been in Sydney today, I guess, since probably March last year. And I was reflecting today about how surprised I was that it's just still very quiet in the city. And, if I compare that to Brisbane, where I wouldn't say it's back to pre-COVID, but there's definitely a feeling of a lot more movement and energy and activity in the city. It was really quite interesting. I think, more broadly, one of my biggest challenges on a daily basis is I think Australia's been, handled COVID so well and been so lucky to have such limited community transmission that it's actually really hard to understand and be empathetic with what's happening in some of the other countries where our teams are working. I mean, I was talking to our US teams the other day, the leaders of our business over there, and I said, when was the last time you actually had physical face-to-face conversations with your teams? And they said 10, 11 months ago, right? I mean, that's an extraordinarily hard thing for me to actually grasp, you know, the impact of it. So I think we've been very, very lucky about how it's been handled here.
I think we've all experienced that a little bit. I often feel that when I get on calls with some of my global colleagues, and you're very aware. I think I've got a few quick fire questions here that I'll put to you. Rod, a quick one for you. How does technology help you manage your global operations?
Well, I guess as Chris just said, you know, it's everything these days. We pivoted very quickly to running Microsoft Teams and Zoom and making sure we had enough, a wide enough pipeline to get all our data and video down and all that. Prior to that, we were on planes regularly to Asia and the UK and other parts of the world, and I don't think any of us had travelled, probably bar one of my EGMs. And my safety guy, other than that, none of us have travelled for 12 months now. So technology is at the forefront of everything we do now. So if we're not video conferencing, we're all exchanging our application and our notes via Microsoft Teams is the platform we're using. But that is something that we had to fast track very quickly, and absolute credit to our IT department. They managed to get us online despite all our whinging very quickly, which was fantastic. So I see definitely going forward that, you know, we just won't do the air miles that we were doing previously when it's so convenient now to do webinars like this one, and also to have Microsoft Teams meetings at any time of the day with our colleagues around the world.
Yeah, I think that's quite common with a lot of companies now and the way they've pivoted. Chris, quick one for you. What company do you think, or what example would you like to use to give us an idea of some of the most innovative responses you've seen to the pandemic?
I think, look, there's lots of opportunities we see every day. I think two that have really excited me are very similar. They're two of our clients, Syngenta and Bank Itaú, and what they've done is they've looked at their response to COVID and the threat to their business, and then created their response to that. They've pushed up and down their supply chain to ensure that their whole system is continuing. But what's more important, they've used the opportunity to actually accelerate some of their business strategy projects, particularly again in that climate space. A really, really good example of innovating not just to address the sustainability from the pandemic, but also actually using that, in a way, a bit of a break in headspace to accelerate into other areas.
And I know that there's lots of people on the call that are probably asking if there are any resources that you could recommend or that Palladium have available to listeners. Is there anything that you could suggest people?
Yeah, definitely. Look, we put out reports and have a digest on our website regularly. We also have different insights and snippets of information coming out on social media every couple of days. So if you find us on LinkedIn or at our website, thepalladiumgroup.com, you'll be able to sign up and get access to all of that.
One I'll put to both of you, maybe to you first, Chris. What's the next big tech investment that you...
It's definitely knowledge networks, helping us move from, you know, more static knowledge management into a more dynamic networking of our knowledge capability.
And Rod?
We'll be putting a lot of energy, pardon the pun, and effort into the energy sector. Coming up, we see a lot of opportunities as Australia transitions to a decentralised generation market to capitalise on in some niche areas there. We'll be put a lot of time and energy into specialised electric vehicles in those areas as well, where we see opportunities. From internally at Ampco Control, we've got some plans to continue to grow our internal networks a lot more as well. A big future for us we see is in smart services as well, data acquisition, information sessions, and then helping our customers achieve and overcome problems before they actually become major problems in their things. So they're the big plays for us this year.
Okay. What would be the key message that the audience should take away from today's session, Chris?
Oh, look, I think the message is pretty obvious to me. It's that, you know, businesses need to be flexible and innovative, and so to overcome any challenges. And so making sure their business processes, their systems, their outlook, their strategy is nimble and agile and can both take advantage of opportunities that present, but also quickly jump in front and mitigate any kind of downside risk.
And Rod?
Oh, look, I couldn't agree with Chris more. Agility is a big thing in this world today. I think you've got to be prepared for anything can happen, and we saw that this time last year. Anything did happen, and I think the ability to be able to pivot quickly to the changing circumstances through agility is a very key one. So be agile, have a good sound strategy that has options built into it that you can pivot very quickly.
We've got a few questions that have come in from the audience, so I might just go to a couple of these if that's okay. One for you, Chris. Working in so many countries, what have been the impacts been on your team in some of the most heavily COVID-19 impacted countries?
So look, I mean, on a practical level, we've had, the worst you could imagine. We've had some fatalities directly as a result of COVID. And we've had that right through to some of the things I talked about in terms of how the teams operate and the business can continue. I think, one of the things that I learnt quite early on is that for that business continuity perspective, some of the things that you would normally, normally if someone was sick in the organisation, that you would kind of mitigate that while they were sick until they came back, whereas now taking a much more active interest in their and their families' ongoing well-being through their infections with COVID, and I mean, it's a hard construct for me to come across being based out of Australia, but the number of people and the percent of our workforce around the world who's had COVID is quite significant. So that need to continue to support them, support their families, to enable them to continue both their livelihoods but also the business continuity.
Rod, one for you, which I like. Has Ampco Control always been so innovative, or did COVID accelerate this?
No, Ampco Control has always been a very innovative company. We've been at the forefront of a lot of mining technologies now for 50 years. What we recognised, though, about 7 or 8 years ago was that we needed to have a much more diversified business, and we needed to spread our innovation across a greater platform than just the mining sector. So really for the last 7 or 8 years, we've put a lot of time and energy and effort into other markets, understanding where the opportunities are, and then seeing how we can offer a differentiator and have a selling proposition into that marketplace without being and also just another Johnny-come-lately in those sectors. So I'm very, very fortunate that we've got some very intelligent engineers that work in our business, and they come up with all these wonderful harebrained ideas, and a good percentage of them turn into products and solutions.
I've got one here as well that someone's been Googling your company and looking up your website, which is great. But there's nothing they can find around the rural communities around Alice Springs. Could you possibly just give us the background?
Yes, if you're on our website. The name of the product is Gilgo, Gilghi. It's the Aboriginal Indigenous word for places of still water. So Google Gilghi on our website, or search Gilgo, and you'll find our remote water purification system. You'll also, if you Google or you search Solar Cube, you'll find our Solar Cube product there as well, listed under those areas. So there, and the little town that we put it in, or the little community that we put it in, was called Gilenbore, Gilenbore. So wonderful little community out there, and I was very fortunate to taste one of the first glasses of water that came out of the water purification system, and I can highly recommend it.
We could probably put a link to that in the follow-up email as well, so a bit about that case study. But an interesting one, the government talks a lot about sovereign risk, but how important is it to have a vertical integrated supply chain to control production, efficiency and timelines? Who wants to have a go at that one first? Chris?
I mean, I think it's a little bit dependent on what we're talking about. I mean, I strongly believe and encourage our clients that they don't need to control everything. What they need to do is to understand the interplay. So if you think about where they're operating inside a system, and that system's got lots of other actors. And so understanding strategically what those other actors are doing, where they fit in, how the interplays work, and what's actually driving, let's say it's another business, what's driving and motivating them. And so if you can build into your strategy that understanding of what they're after and make sure that you're contributing to their success while they're contributing to your success, I think that control is not important because you're working then. It's that collaboration we touched on before. Collaboration is king to making yourself sustainable and successful.
Few words that have come up a lot today. Collaboration's definitely one, which is fantastic. The other one that's come up a bit is sustainability, and there's been a number of questions around this. And I'll go to you both, but do you have any advice on how to look at opportunities within sustainability and to bring those into your business planning moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess when we look at any opportunities, my chief technology officer always says that if we're going to fail, fail fast. So we have a gated approach to most things that we look at. So I guess making sure we're sustainable in everything that we do is, if we don't think that something is going to work, we get out of it quickly. So before we spend too much money and before we get the wrath of boards of directors coming after us to say what have we done in that particular case. But I think to be here and to be a sustainable business, you need to be able to, as Chris has already said, you need to have strong partnerships, you need to have a good innovation strategy, and you need to be able to pivot quickly.
Yeah, look, I agree. I think the thing I would add to that is, sustainability, again, it comes back to those having a benefit to those around you as well, and looking at things that are of interest. I mean, the number of examples of sustainable activities going on that I see that have limited interest and they just kind of wither and die versus ones that are extraordinarily passionate. I mean, the challenge around the passionate ones is actually having the discipline to stop it when it's not going in the right direction. But that's a much better challenge, I believe, than having to try and push things forward.
Look, thank you both. I'm afraid I think that's just about all we've got time for today. Apologies if we didn't respond to your questions, but please do rest assured we will follow up with you directly with an answer. I know all of you will join me in thanking our speakers, Rod and Chris, for offering their time today. As John mentioned at the start of this session, this was the second in a series of events called the HSBC Innovation Series, and it's continuing over the next few months. Jamie Ferris, the CEO of Corporate Travel Management, joins us on the 17th of March to discuss bigger data, and Tim Ford, the CEO of Treasury Wine Estates, is participating in our bigger trade discussion on the 20th of April. Please do keep an eye out on our event website for updates on these sessions and also to find a recording of today's event. As always, we really do welcome your feedback. We'd love to hear what you think of these events, any improvements we could make or topics that we could address. And I'd kindly ask you to take the time to complete the online survey link that will be emailed to you soon. In the meantime though, on behalf of HSBC, thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.